Good morning and welcome everybody. This is module 3 of the Start Where They Are series. This is a session today where we are going to talk about promoting success in daily routines, and that includes dressing, toothbrushing, toileting, mealtime behaviors, all the fun stuff that we go through every single day. So last week, just a refresher for those of you who were with us, we talked about promoting self-advocacy and joy through social interactions. Remember, we talked about, what communication might look like with our little ones, that it can be just a quick glance or bringing you something. And what we want to do is engage them in some fun ways to encourage and build on those skills to increase what they can do to tell us that they enjoy something, that they don't like something, those sorts of things. And today, we're going to get into things that sometimes we can't always avoid, whether it's getting dressed or having a meal, brushing our teeth, those sorts of things. And so this is what we're going to cover today. I've made a little schedule for us because we're going to talk about schedules today. So you can see that we're going to focus on those issues of daily living skills and consider, where do we start, of course, and then we're going to talk about strategies you can use to promote greater independence in those areas. So let's get started. Daily living skills covers a lot of things, really essential things. We want to make sure our kids eat, practice good hygiene, wear some clothes, go to sleep, really basic stuff. But these are the things I think that cause a lot of the issues we see early on and lead us to a diagnosis where we're having difficulty in all of these areas and resulting in meltdowns and challenges and power struggles and such. So that's what we're looking at fixing up today and making gains with. So why is this so hard, right? With autism, we find these things to be challenging. And to understand why, we have to consider how our kids are through the lens of autism. That's what we talked about in session 1. We talk about it every session. What is it about autism that makes these things difficult? Well, there's a couple things. And a lot of them fall under this concept of executive function. This is how our brains work, and it involves, time management, things like working memory. Working memory is like if I tell you to do something and you don't remember what I tell you 5 minutes later. Your working memory is not retaining that information. Our ability to plan or sequence, a lot of these tasks involve multiple steps, and keeping them in order is hard. Organizing things to be able to put together multiple steps to create a larger routine can be challenging. Of course, sticking with things and paying attention to the little details. Those are all parts of executive functioning. Being flexible, being able to change a routine, that's also part of executive functioning. And we can even talk about predicting what's next and understanding others as part of that as well. Really anything that your brain has to do to organize thoughts and sequence is what we consider executive functioning. And so, remind you of the things we talked about in session 1 to help us understand the autism better. But with that hula hoop, if they're in that fixed space and time, they're not anticipating what's next. They're not necessarily remembering. There's that working memory again, the things, the details that they learned in the past or that they need to use for the future. They're not necessarily remembering that you showed them how to do this yesterday, or that you showed them how to do this 20 minutes ago, and now they have to do it now. The hula hoop helps us also appreciate that sensory overload, that maybe our sensory experiences are intensified by that close space. in the hula hoop. And then our trained brains also are part of this autism, and how it may impact those daily living skills. It may make transitioning from one activity, a preferred activity, for instance, to a non-preferred activity, which often these daily living skills are. It may, make that difficult. And their processing speed also. While trains do move really fast, you can only get from one point to another, um, in one way. And so thinking about the train and how, um, we may not be able to switch gears as quickly because we're not at that station yet. As easily. So, and then of course, because trains are stuck on tracks, people with autism can be pretty stuck too, and may have a very rigid way of going about things, doing them in a certain way. And you may be wanting them to do things differently and requiring some flexibility that just isn't there yet. So we are going to have to deal with these sorts of challenges. Just a quick note about that sensory too, a little quote from Temple Grandin. She says, for me and other people in the autism spectrum, sensory experiences that have little or no effect on neurotypical people can be severe life stressors for us. So, for instance, loud noises hurt my ears like a dentist's drill hitting a nerve. So, our kids on the spectrum may be experiencing those sensory things very differently. And if you think about things like, a toddler and getting dressed and brushing teeth, not only do those activities involve a lot of sensory experiences, but chances are, we are touching them, holding them, and doing things to them, to get those tasks done. And so that it heightens the sensory experience that they're having in any of these skills. So we often say that our children need structure, and structure can be sort of defined as organizing an environment or an activity or an interaction to make it predictable and understandable. So we want to find where it can be predictable, where it can be more concretely expressed for them. And that's going to promote greater levels of independence for your child. That's what we're trying to do when we talk about adding structure. You hear this so much in the autism community. So what do? We set the stage for learning. And this is a sort of 3-step process that, we would follow to teach any new skill. And setting the stage is the first part of this process. And this involves setting routines, establishing those in your home, having supports in place, maybe schedules, breaking skills down to teachable parts, and structuring routines so that it's clear when they start and when they end. Once we've taken the time to do this, then we, help your child with prompting to, use the support that's in place to complete what that task is. And the prompting fades, but the support, the structure that we've put in place does not necessarily until the child fades it. And we can talk about that later. And then finally, when they are doing the things that we're wanting them to do, we want to make sure we're reinforcing that, acknowledging their efforts, lots of praise, other reinforcement, and providing lots of opportunities to practice, as naturally as we can, integrated into the course of our day, so that we can provide that reinforcement as often as possible. And that's going to help solidify those skills. So that's kind of an overwhelming process. So we're going to break that down and start off by talking about setting the stage for learning. That's the place where we need to begin. And just one note before we start talking about that, it's going to sound very overwhelming what we're talking about today. And I want you to know that nobody's expecting you to set the stage for every single task that you think your child needs to be working on. It's really going to be one thing at a time. Okay, don't feel like you have to do it all in one fell swoop. But we need to set the stage for learning. And this is where we have to start. The first place to start is understanding what our goal is in the first place. So let's think about, how do you get your child to do things right now? When I ask parents this question, the answer I get most often is I tell them what to do. And and then I might ask, well, how many times? And generally the answer is a lot. So we have to tell them maybe 5 or 6 times before they get it. Um, and so that's certainly a concern, and definitely exhausting as a parent, but also exhausting for our kids. They can think of that prompting, all that verbal prompting over and over and over again as nagging. Yeah. And after a while, they tune that out. So that's kind of a problem. But I want you to consider this, verbally prompting. If you're doing that, how are they ever going to do things on their own? They're clearly not getting it with just that verbal prompting. And we've got to consider sort of the long game in this. Autism is not a one and done type of thing. It is a lifelong journey. We always say it's a marathon, not a sprint. So, we've got to pay attention, even at these early stages, to the fact that we are not going to be around for the rest of their lives. So if they're dependent on our verbal prompting, we're shortchanging them on greater autonomy and independence. So we really need to plan for this. And that's why I want to talk about reframing this idea of independent. We want our kids to be independent, but maybe independent is different from what we think it is. So I want you to consider, if you have ever had the joy, sarcastic, of putting together an IKEA furniture item, or maybe just helping your kid put together a Lego set. If you've ever had the opportunity to do that, have you ever put it together without looking at the directions? If you have, there is a career for that. But if you haven't, you're like most of us. We need those directions. And I would argue that if you successfully put together an IKEA dresser using the directions, you have done that independently. Just like my friend Darth Vader here, who is trying to put together his TIE fighter that he got from IKEA. Fortunately, they provided him with directions, and it looks like a little tool to help him out. And that's okay. We're not going to judge Darth Vader for using the directions. So when we define what independent means, we think of it as a skill that the person is doing without any assistance from another person. And if they are using visual support but no verbal prompting, also that's considered independent. And that's really our goal. We want them to become independent, but we can still provide structure to them, so that they can have that greater level of autonomy and independence. That's what we're shooting for. Visual schedules and other visual supports are the key for people with autism. These it's one of our evidence-based practices, but definitely become the foundation for almost all of the others. Schedules can be a life float for individuals with autism as they try to make sense of their world. And they're really an essential tool to support individuals with ASD throughout their day. We are going to talk about other visual supports as well, but I'm going to focus on schedules for a minute, because one of the things I said when we talked about setting the stage for learning was having just a consistent daily routine. And this is important for a lot of reasons, and schedules become a part of this. So let me share with you some of the benefits of using a visual schedule, because there's kind of a lot. First of all, what is it? It's a representation of time and responsibility. What am I supposed to do, and when am I supposed to do it? It doesn't have to be from the minute I wake up to the moment I go to sleep. It can be a portion of the day for sure. And it definitely will include either images or words showing the sequence of activities or the events that are going to follow during the span of time that that schedule will cover. And I'm going to show you lots of examples, different ways, because I did mention words. And of course, many of you are parents of little kids who aren't reading yet, so that won't make sense, will it? But images can work, and even objects. So schedules matter for people with autism because they help them transition from one activity to another. They help them manage their time. And this was the reason we started using a schedule with my son. He was diagnosed when he was 3 years old, right before his third birthday. And on the right, you see a picture of his very first schedule. We used photographs of things in our house so that he knew what we were doing next. And I want to point out, you can sort of see that the background of that is yellow. If you can't take my word for it, I took yellow ink and sponged it onto that paper before I had invested in just an entire sheaf of yellow poster board for things. Because he was really motivated by anything yellow. And so I built in that motivation to his very first schedule. But we started using the schedule to help him with transitions in those daily living skills, because he would just tantrum from one to the next. I would say, time to do this, and he would have a meltdown. And I'd say, time to do this, and he would say, he would have a meltdown. And so that was how our days went until we introduced the schedule. And it took him a little while to get used to it, but that really did help him know what to expect. It helped him see beyond the boundaries of his hula hoop of time and know what was coming next. So those were the first benefits I saw with schedules. But over time, and my son's 29 years old now, I have learned that there are many, many more benefits for him and for me. One of those is that it helps us teach the skill of waiting or deferred gratification. Most of you probably know Veruca Salt from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and she's saying, I want it now. She's not good at waiting. And if somebody had only helped Veruca know, first, we're gonna walk around the factory, and then when we're done, you can have a golden egg. She might have been a little more patient. So we definitely want to, use visual supports. First, then, is a schedule. It helps us structure time and expectations and responsibility. First, you do this, then you get this. Or first, you do this, and then you do this. So, in addition to helping them know that they will get the thing they want, we've built in, excuse me, that motivation into the process. We also are lowering their anxiety. This was something I didn't understand initially, but completely understand now about schedules, that by helping them understand what's coming next or when they will get to do things they want to do, we are lowering anxiety. The schedule is creating predictability for them, and it's communicating to them when they will get to do things that they prefer doing. And so this is a really important element of schedules. Here are a couple more examples as we go through. You can see the one on the left uses objects. And like I said initially, we can communicate the different steps of the schedule using all sorts of different visual representations, whether it's objects or pictures and pictures that are photographs versus pictures that are line drawings. You'll see more examples in a minute. Of course, for those kids, as they get older and they learn to read, you can see the schedule on the right has some reading, but we help them with just knowing what's next. Again, helping lower anxiety and maybe deferred gratification. You see on the schedule on the right, we got McDonald's at the end. And so that may be something that's motivating for this young person, knowing when they get to do those things. Another benefit is that they create opportunities for responsibility and accountability. So we're putting things on the schedule that they need to do in the course of the day. And think about how proud your kid will feel when they've been able to do something that you're expecting them to do. We shower them with praise so they know we're proud, but that builds self-esteem and confidence. And these are things we want to do. The experience of having autism, this was something I think I learned only recently, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, but it involves a lot of correction and redirection, and that really takes a hit on somebody's confidence. And so the more we can do to support them in feeling autonomous, independent, we're going to build their self-esteem and their confidence. And this provides a big benefit to their mental health, something that we want to be very, very aware of as our kids grow up. So the schedule also provides that as well. And it will include things that they have to get done. And of course, the schedules matter for us as well. Parents, for teachers, caregivers, there are benefits for us too. And again, more examples of what these can look like. But the first thing is that they do force us to get organized and plan ahead. You can't make a schedule unless you know what's going to happen. So as a parent, we may need to think about, what are we going to do in the course of the morning? I'm not going to go back to that first schedule of mine that you saw initially, but that just included from waking up until after breakfast. It just included a small period of time, and then we would refill the schedule when we had finished it. But you can see on the left, there's a morning activities and afternoon activities. The schedule on the right is a much more complex schedule. This is for a young adult. So you can see, that we start simple, and for some of our kids, we can build up to something really complex. I do want to point out something we'll talk about later, but there are places in the schedule on the right for the young man that this was for, to put in things that he wanted to do. What chores do I want to do today? What game do I want to play when it's time to play a game? And so having some say means that we're giving him an opportunity to self-advocate and make choices, which is an important part of supporting our kids. They also provide consistency when multiple adults are supporting somebody with autism. So, for some of us, my husband and I share parenting duties, and sometimes it's his turn and sometimes it's my turn. But, we may have, our voices are different, the words we choose might be different. But with the visual supports, it didn't matter which parent was supporting our son through the morning routine or the afternoon routine, because all the important information was on the schedule or the checklist, whatever the visual support was. And that way, whoever was supporting him, sometimes it was a babysitter, sometimes it was a grandparent, but the visual support remained the same. So that consistency is important for people with autism. They really thrive when things are predictable. They have a hard time with change. And so the schedule becomes the consistency. The visual supports that are around our home, that my son uses daily, those remain consistent. And that's what he needs to be successful. And here's a pro tip, parenting pro tip. Sometimes there are things on the schedule they don't want to do. And so there'll be some pushback. I don't want to, get dressed. And, don't say, I told you we need to get dressed. Blame it on the schedule. I love this little cartoon. I finally figured it out after 15 years The scroll of truth, because I said so, isn't a valid reason. Ah, so annoying. But if the schedule says so, much better. So I have found often when there were things on the schedule that my son didn't want to do, I'm like, look, schedule says do this, and then you can get to do this. So let's follow the schedule and get it done. And he really that made a difference. Now, some kids, because the schedule is so powerful, will also, you'll find that they'll rip up the schedule. They don't want to hear what the schedule has to say. And so, persevere, don't give up. It might be that we need to alter the format of the schedule, make sure, like I said, we made sure the schedules were on yellow paper for a long time. If you need to put pictures of Pokemon or My Little Pony or whatever is the latest craze on the schedule, put it on there so that the schedule is super appealing. Another benefit of schedules for parents is that they allow us to really be specific. That's not the real word I want. Intentional about our reinforcement. So, we can embed it into the schedule. And here are two first then schedule models, one with pictures, one with actual objects. The one on the left says put toys away, but then we get bubbles, and bubbles are clearly motivating for this young person. So even has a picture of the kid blowing the bubbles, maybe. So, that's we're embedding the motivator into the support. And that's really important. Same with the one on the right. First change diaper, then get to read a book. And the actual diaper is in the first bucket. And so the kid can go and pick up that diaper and hand it to the parent, get ready for diaper changing. And then once that's done, they can go to the then bin and get the book. And you can see that, I don't know if you can see, but the lid is on the then bin. So there's no access to the book until we've clearly done what's in the first bin. So I really do like these examples. And then finally, one more benefit is that, once your kid learns to use the schedule, then when you're ready to teach a new skill or give them a new responsibility, you have a tool for communicating that new responsibility, or maybe you have to change the routine. And now you have a tool and a system for teaching that. This is an example of what my son's schedule looked like when he was in high school. So he had gotten to a point where he could look at a schedule rather than interact with it. And so it was just, what was on his iPad. But, we added fold laundry on Tuesdays to his schedule because we had been, working on that skill. We wanted to have him start folding his own laundry. And so we added that to the schedule and he could see it. So just to review, oh, wait, there's one more benefit first. I just want to show you too that, schedules are not fixed in their format forever for a kid, that they can change over time. So this is the progression of what my son's visual schedules looked like over time. He started with pictures and removing those pictures and putting them in that little pocket to mark time. And once he learned to read, we were able to switch to words, and you can see the yellow cardboard there. Like I said, we have lots of it. Eventually, we were able to switch to dry erase board. And we really had dry erase boards everywhere, in the car, in the house, in several rooms, at my parents' house. He had them at school. And when he got to be in high school, actually after high school, I guess it was college, and as an adult, he uses his iPad. It is the only form of the 4 schedules you see that he doesn't interact with physically. And that's just because he has had something consistent as a schedule all of his life. So he knows he has to attend to it and follow it. But this is something that, as parents and support people, we definitely want to know that we are going to change it as our kids change. Whether it's, if he's tired of yellow and doesn't not motivated by yellow, we want to change how the schedule looked like. If they understand time, you can see we were able to add the element of time when he got older. That was because he had a more sophisticated understanding, and we could change the format again. So changing the format to meet their developmental needs is important over time, and the schedule system is flexible that way. So we also, I want to point out that they're really great for solving problems. So if you look closely at the schedule, our very first schedule, you'll see getting dressed is the very first thing on that schedule. But that wasn't the original schedule when we first started using one. When he first started using a schedule, he would get up in the morning and come downstairs and eat breakfast. And then he would, what would he do? He would play. And then it would be time to get dressed. And that always resulted in a meltdown, stopping play to get dressed. And so he learned to use the schedule that way, but it was still a struggle. And so one day we thought, well, maybe he just doesn't like stopping play in order to get dressed, because getting dressed meant not only stopping play, but also going upstairs again, which for him was physically challenging. And because he had a lot of motor skill delays. And so we just changed, we used the schedule. Now that he knew how to use it, we moved get dressed to be the first thing on his schedule. And so he would get dressed first and then proceed with his day. And so that ended the meltdown for getting dressed. Just by using the schedule and changing when we did that activity of daily living, we were able to get him more engaged. And then we could start on teaching him how to participate in learning how to get dressed. So, and my screen just changed. So let's see if we can get back to the slideshow. There we go. So, this is just an overview of everything I just said, but I want you to see how many benefits there are, both for people with autism and for caregivers, parents and other caregivers, in using schedules. It's not just about transitioning from one thing to another. There are so many positive benefits over time when we use this. So let's talk about characteristics of a visual schedule. It really needs to be interactive. It needs to be something that we, whether we are moving objects or crossing things out, checking things off, those are all ways to interact with a schedule. And of course, we want to keep in mind what is our child's ability at the time. Do they know how to match pictures, for instance, if we're using a matching system? Are they physically able to remove the picture if it's Velcroed to a laminated surface? So we need to make sure that it's something they can interact with. And we want to make it reusable. I mentioned lamination. The first thing I bought for our home to support our son was a laminating machine and a big roll of Velcro. That is the ramp that you need for accessibility. And so making sure it's reusable is really key, because it's not something you use once in a while. It's going to be something you use throughout the day, every day. You might even want to think about making it portable so that it's accessible not only in your house, but in the car, at your in-laws' house, at school, at daycare, at the neighbor's house, wherever they need that visual information. Wherever they have autism, they're going to need it. And so, you may start working on the skill of using a schedule at home, but as soon as they get the hang of it, start thinking about how can I expand it so that it is portable. For some parents, they'll use a binder and have like the schedule on the front, like a strip of Velcro on the front of the binder. And inside the binder are just loads of these pictures that have meaning for their kids so that they can create the schedule and just take the binder wherever they go. So checklists are also a kind of visual schedule in a way. Sometimes they do matter what order things are being done in, but sometimes they don't. And so checklists I think of as less dependent on the order. And but again, we make it interactive and we make it visual. So on the one on the top, we have little magnetic flip covers. So when that thing is done, they just flip it up and cover the task or move the picture to the right from the to-do list to the done list, as you can see on the clipboard on the right side. And then I want to point out the one on the left bottom. That checklist was actually one of mine again, but I want to point out two things about it. My son's checks are yellow, again, incorporating that yellow in there where we can, but my daughter is on there as well. And I want to just mention that there is no harm using any of this with neurotypical siblings. And we incorporated our daughter in, we gave her a schedule, put her on the checklists. We decided, well, we'll just do it for all of them. And part of that was that she was diagnosed. No, she's not. She does not have autism. She was born 3 weeks after my son was diagnosed. So she's always grown up in a house of autism. And so as soon as she was old enough to have her own schedule, we gave her one. And I have to tell you now, as an adult, she's one of the most organized persons you've ever met. So we can organize a schedule with objects. This one shows what order to do things, builds in motivation. This is for an older girl, probably might be interested in Teen Magazine as a motivator. So she knows she's got to brush her teeth, and then she's going to floss her teeth, and she's going to brush her hair. She has each of the objects she needs to complete those tasks of daily living. And once she's emptied each of those baskets, she can get that magazine. And notice that there's this left to right progression. We use either that left to right progression or the top to bottom progression with our schedules, primarily because here, this is how we read. We read a page top to bottom and left to right. And so even if our kids are not readers, we're still building in that pre-reading skill of navigating information left to right and top to bottom. So we also need to consider, as we're creating these visuals, what are the steps involved in doing that task? So, hand washing, it's great to put hand washing on a schedule, but now it's like, okay, what are all the steps for hand washing? We need to break that down sometimes. And the steps involved with any one of these tasks, may be more than you realize. So, what does it mean to put on your socks? Well, you need to orient the sock first. And you need to know where your toes are. And then we can, put your toes in the opening. We've got to locate the opening and pull. What does that mean? So these are things that, we would consider. And breaking down any one of these can be pretty complex, but we call that sort of skill segmentation, and we are identifying the steps to teach. And then we can also sort of look at those tasks to figure out, when do we fade support? Or, there might be a step in there where they don't need as much support. And so we can give them that to do more independently. This is something I think for a lot of very complex tasks that people lose sight of, that, sometimes a task, whether it's a chore at home or part of getting dressed, there may be components of it that are too complex at the moment. for our kids, but then there may be other steps that they can do. And we want to make sure we're giving them the opportunity to do those steps more independently. Um, the other thing is that when we're breaking down a task into steps and we really are making it visual, we're creating that consistent approach that we're going to approach that task the same way every time. So, for instance, when we're teaching a skill like washing hands, we might break down turning on the water, wet your hands, pump the soap. We may have to be very specific about how many pumps of the soap that we make. Um, you know, we lather hands, and there's a picture to support. Lather's a complex word, but making all the bubbles, rinsing, getting the towel, drying the hands, turning off the water. So these are all, steps that we might have to break down to understand, to make it understandable for our kids. But when we're doing this, we want to make sure that we provide the visual structure, and when we go to teach the skill, we guide them through the different steps. So instead of telling them what to do, we might point to the turn on water picture, and we can say the words turn on water initially, but what we really want to do is get to the point where we're just having them refer to the pictures. So the prompting is like saying, what's next? Pointing to the picture, what's next? What's next? What's next? So always making sure that the visual information is the source of the directions. And that's the guided practice. Eventually, we fade the prompts and they're referring to the pictures to learn how to do that task. And when we feel like they are doing it without our prompting, then we can step out and see if they can do it on their own. So that setting the stage part is creating that visual. And that's, again, where I want to remind you, in your mind, you're probably thinking about all the different tasks that you would need to create visual structure for to teach them the new skill. And that can be overwhelming. So again, I want you to think about, just pick one and make visual directions for one task and work on that one. And, once that has moved along to a point where, you're doing that guided practice, then you can think about the next one. Don't feel like you have to suddenly have visual directions all over your house for every little thing all at once. That is quite overwhelming, and I don't want you to be overwhelmed. I know you are, but anyway, so when we teach these skills, though, having those visual supports is really key, because we want to fade our verbal prompting and even our presence in the room if we can, so that they're referring to the visuals that we leave in place. Just a couple, we can also put reminders places, remembering to wash hands, flush the toilet, wash our hands when we're done. These are different visuals that we might use just as reminders once they've learned the skill. We like this toilet lid a lot. Obviously, we're big Star Wars fans around here. But anything we can do to just remind them of the skills that we've taught them, because of that hula hoop and that working memory, having the visual support right there where they need it puts it in the right location at the right time for that reminder. So that's key. And here's just a couple other visual supports that we can use. Timers are a great one, and they can help our kids with these difficult transitions when they're going from a preferred activity to a non-preferred activity. So, having a timer so they know how much longer they get to do what they're doing That can be really helpful. It helps them anticipate when the change is coming. It can also be used for non-preferred activities when they need to know, like, how much longer do I need to endure this thing that I don't want to do? And having the timer can bring some comfort to know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. So timers play an important role, and you can find digital timers like some of the ones pictured here, or more physical visual timers like the sand, glass, or I've seen gel visual timers. There's all sorts. The one on the right bottom, I think, has some lights associated with it. Um, and then, a kitchen timer. That one's a little harder to see the time decreasing. And so those are a little more challenging, but worth considering. And then I also want to share this concept of a visual countdown. So for some of our kids, watching the red space get smaller is very stressful. But also, it may be that we're going to clean up before dinner, but you're not exactly sure how many minutes that's going to be. So setting a timer might be hard. And so a visual countdown is a little more flexible time-wise for you, but it allows them to see that we are winding down. So for instance, you take a stack of Duplos and or the big fat chunky Legos, and you make a stack of 5, and you put numbers on all of them, and every time you're ready to see move forward, we just pull one away, we pull one away, we pull one away, and we remind them, when the stack is gone, it's going to be time for dinner. And so you pull them away, and it just helps them know that time is lapsing and we're going to be making a transition. And when they get to the 1, it's time to check schedule to go to the next activity. And the schedule says time for dinner. And so we go to dinner. Another countdown, that's a strip on the right with just numbers that they pull down. That's a little less concrete because we are using the numbers, but any way that you can represent this countdown idea can be helpful and helping them with transitions. So a lot of times when I'm talking to parents of kids who are a little older than your kids about challenges they're having, I'll ask them if they're using a visual schedule or visual supports at home. And they often say, well, I used them when they were little, but we stopped. Or they'll say that we tried, but he didn't like using them. So I hear a lot of reasons. Here's a few more of why we're not using visual schedules. So some parents I know are very overwhelmed about making them for the entire day. Visual supports were going to prevent my child from learning to speak. And I do want to assure you that they don't. They, if anything, for kids who are maybe on the cusp of using language, more intentionally, they can support it because they can facilitate that exchange of conversation. So they're not going to prevent speech if it's meant to come. Sometimes I talk to families who are like, well, they use them at school, but we don't want to be as rigid at home. And if you're having challenges at home, you probably need the structure of the schedule and other visual supports at home. But I do want to say that I have found that the structure actually is what leads to flexibility. So once my son learned how to use a schedule, then we were able to say, oh, the schedule's different today. Here is today's schedule, and represent it the same way he's used to seeing it. And that helped him make that transition to do something different today. It allows us to go on vacation, for instance, to go out and do something different. We just bring a schedule so he knows what will be the plan. And And if the plan changes, we can use the schedule to communicate that. And he still gets a lot of comfort from it. So it's actually given us, it's opened up our world using schedules rather than making our home life so rigid that we feel stifled. It's the opposite. And then, as I said at the start, we used one when he was little, but he doesn't need one anymore. This is not a strategy for little kids only. It's important to do when they're little because what we're teaching them is a skill for life. Learning how to use and refer to visual supports is going to expand their opportunities over time. And so that's actually, it's the opposite. They need them forever. Now, does it mean that you will have a visual schedule every single day if your routine is the same every day? No, they may learn the schedule. If the schedule is the same every day, they may learn that schedule. And then we fade it. But as soon as the schedule changes, then we bring it back. So, we had a very, very set routine when my son was in middle and high school. However, there were days where, he had to go get a haircut after school, or he needed to go to the neurologist after school, or maybe we were going to have an appointment in the morning and then go to school late. And so, that was a change in his routine. So I would pull out that dry erase board. I would write down what the new schedule was going to be, and I would present that to him well in advance of when the change was going to happen, so that he could start, his trained brain could start processing that change. And when it was time to really enact it, his trained brain was ready. And so we have always used the visual schedule to communicate to him when the routine is not going to be the same. So that's something that we've used over time. And then, of course, I will talk to parents of tweens and teens who will tell me, well, I just tell them what to do, and eventually he'll do it. And we, of course, as we said in the beginning, verbally prompting ad nauseum is not necessarily a functional option. So visual schedules and supports are, not unique to autism. They're all around us. They help us know, what we're supposed to do. They keep our roads safe. On the right, you can see this is a directions I saw at a restaurant, so that everybody follows the routine that the restaurant needs to be good at their service. So, visual supports are everywhere. They're helpful, but they're really essential for people with autism. The Autism Society of North Carolina has a lot of ways to support you in learning more about this and using some other visual supports as well. This is one that we have a whole section of called social narratives. And these sort of tell a story of what to do and why. So we have a bunch on our website, and you're welcome to use them as is if they're appropriate, but you may have to modify them to look appropriate for your child. So we may have to simplify the text in a way, use more pictures and fewer words, for instance. Or, you may have to use photographs to support it, to make it really meaningful for your child. It's not a strategy for kids who cannot follow a story type approach, but if your kid is happy to be read to and has a sense of story, then this can be a good technique to use. We used social narrative a lot to explain, for instance, the rules at the playground, and how to interact with kids at the playground. We use them to help him know what to do at bedtime and help with the bedtime routine. And we used them to help him get ready for kindergarten. What would kindergarten be like? So these are all examples. We have lots. So we've, set the stage for learning. Really, if you're doing a good job with setting the stage, the prompting and fading and fading the prompts. That's that guided practice I was talking about. So, we provide physical assistance if they need it, or partial physical assistance. Think about hand washing, and we might need to help them know what it means to make the bubbles with their hands before they actually can do it themselves. We might model it. Of course, verbal prompts can be part of that process, but we want to fade them. And then eventually, we might just have a gesture, pointing to the faucet or turning the faucet, and having them, imitate that to do that task. And physical proximity is just being present. So it may be that we just need to be present, and that's sort of, we're ready to fade ourselves completely when we're just close by. But we want to make sure that, the assistance we're providing is temporary. We want to fade everything that we can in supporting them with the routine. It may be that, some kids, like I said, there may be steps in a full process that they are going to need help with. That doesn't mean that there aren't parts that they can do themselves. And we can designate, with pictures, mommy does this, you do that, with along with each of the steps if that's necessary. But we're always looking to fade the prompting. Of course, if we fade our prompts too soon, probably they're not going to do the task the way we expect it to be done. So that's kind of important to keep in mind. But our job is to work ourselves out of the routines. So, by working them ourselves out of the routine so that they're doing them independently with the visual supports or structure we've put in place, we're making sure that, that they have the opportunity for self-advocacy and self-determination and independence. This is, part of all of this learning. So just a quick summary of communication-based strategies that we associate with this. But, we want to make sure that as we're giving directions, if we are using our words, that we ration them, use as little spoken language as we can, and make sure our language is very concrete and direct. We want to show expectations visually, modeling, using gesture. Those are all forms of communication that are unspoken, and pictures and written words can certainly communicate those things, again, without speech. But we want to make sure that we're also communicating clearly when a task is done. What does it look like when it's finished? The simple visual narratives to tell the story of what's going to happen next. I remember taking our son to our babysitter's wedding, and she was so funny because she gave us a schedule and a visual, like a narrative of how the wedding was going to go, so that he could come and attend the wedding. And that was because he was used to that sort of narrative. And so she provided that support, which was really cool. Making sure that we have something desirable at the end of an especially undesirable routine or task is something we want to include. And those visual timers and countdowns will communicate when something is done or how much longer we are going to do something. So all of these are ways that we're going to communicate to them what we want them to do and what our expectations are for them. And really, this was how, we got our son from here on the left to here on the right. All of these visual supports added up to greater independence, and they will for your kids as well. And I just point out on the left with my son, this was from kindergarten, that, the kindergarten teacher got the memo. And if you look in the background, his schedule is yellow, and all the little word tabs that went on it were yellow. He didn't need yellow. He announced, I think, when he was 8, that he was no longer yellow was no longer his favorite color. And so we were able to fade that strategy out, but he did manage to graduate from college. And I did not go to college with him, but he had a visual schedule and a lot of visual organization, and he had visual reminders in his dorm room for all sorts of things. So I teach a workshop on that. That's separate for when your kids are older. But this is where we started. Start where they are, right? That's what we're talking about. This is where it begins. You're teaching them skills that will carry them through a lifetime. And if you want to learn more about these kinds of strategies, we have webinars on several of the topics we've talked about today that will expand your understanding and get more examples and how-tos. And we have one on toilet training as well, I wanted to mention, because a lot of parents ask about that. And you can find them on our website here. And as Louise reminded you last week, you don't have to see the whole staircase, just take the first step. Pick one thing, figuring out what your daily routine is. What is your morning routine or your bedtime routine? Is that the best routine you have? Then that's where you start. Start where you are too, right? What is the easiest place for you to start with the visual supports? Then take the time, think about what they could look like for your child. It may take you, a week, a month to think about what that's going to look like and put it together. But once you have it, then you can get started, teach them that one thing. And when they've gotten it and when you feel comfortable with it, then you can think about the next thing, one step at a time. So we have time for questions, and I do see a couple, but I haven't been able to look at them while I've been talking. But I do want to remind you, next week we'll talk about heading off problem behaviors with positive support strategies. And then we have our wrap-up session June 1st. And I'll invite you now, if there are topics you would like us to touch on, or things that you would like us to go into more detail in, please let us know. You can put that in the question section, or you can email us. These are a couple other resources. I'll put up our email address at the end in just a moment. But I just wanted to point out, Louise has provided this as a great text. An early start for your child with autism covers a lot of what we're talking about today. It's a great book. And then we have additional resources on our website to support you with learning these things. There, of course, are our social narratives. This is a sample of what they look like for how to go trick-or-treating. Our blog has all sorts of helpful articles written by both autism resource specialists and board-certified behavior analysts. And of course, our webinar library has those recorded webinars that you can watch on your own time and learn more. So if you have any questions, of course, the autism resource specialists, myself, and all my colleagues across the state are happy to answer questions and direct you to resources. And there we go. That's my email address and Louise's email address. If there's something you would like to see on that wrap-up session at the end, please send us an email and we will be sure to include it as best we can in that wrap-up session, because that session is for you.